Hey y'all, it's Brittany and welcome back to another installment of Snapped in Skincare, also known as Clean Skin, Dirty Deeds. So this week we'll be talking all about Miss Rita Gluzman, who really took fighting for your marriage to a completely different level. She also gave us an example that we didn't know we needed about being too flamboyant and being too luxurious looking. It really bit her in the butt at the end of all of this. So if you want to hear all about Miss Rita Gluzman, stay tuned. Now it's a new week, so I always want to share my gratitude. Thank you for those of you who have already subscribed to my channel, who are already a part of the community and have been engaging in those comments. Thank you. For those of you who are just finding my channel, welcome sis, welcome sir. Come on in, have a seat, grab your skincare, and make sure you subscribe to my channel. Also make sure you like the video and make sure you hop in those comments. We are building a community here, so I want to make sure that everybody feels welcome. Your opinions matter here. I'm hopping in there to jump into the conversation as well. So thank you in advance, but let's hop into today's video. Rita Gluzman was actually born Rita Shapiro to Holocaust surviving parents on July 27th of 1948. Rita, by all accounts, was a big dreamer. She also was a very smart young girl, but she had a very troubled childhood. Around the age of 10, Rita was unfortunately sexually assaulted by a Soviet police officer, and there was nothing to follow up behind that. There was no criminal conviction, there was no therapy for Rita. It was 1940s, 1950s, so there was really no follow-up for her. She was also a Jewish girl to a Jewish family in the Soviet, and her mom actually told her the best thing that you can do to survive is not to say anything at all about being attacked by a Soviet police officer, because that was the times that they lived in. So unfortunately, she had no real support from family either. Or at least her mom thought that the best way to support her daughter in this situation was to tell her how to survive on the Soviet streets. Now, a year after this happened, her childhood got even worse because her father was sent to a Soviet prison camp, and her mother decided that instead of staying home to take care of her and her younger sister, she was going to move to the town, which was up some mountain where this prison camp was, so that she could be close to her husband and visit him constantly, bring him food, bring him gifts to keep his spirits up while he was in this prison camp. But that meant that Rita was left at age 10 or 11 to take care of her younger sister. So this really led to them doing things like going through garbage cans to find food, doing basically whatever they could to survive. Now, to make matters worse, when she was in middle school, Rita was also bullied as a kid, and she was bullied specifically by this one kid by the name of Yakov Gluzman. Now, he was just a bully overall, but some of the theory was that, you know, boys, when they're young, their bullying girls is the way to show that they like a girl without saying it. Y'all can miss me with that. Teach y'all sons to be better. Either way, he bullied her. He bullied other kids to the point where he had even thrown one kid off of a second floor balcony. So he was a problem as a child. Now, Yakov may have been a bully as a kid, but he was also a very smart young man. And eventually he and Rita both attended Moscow University for college. He ended up studying microbiology while Rita studied chemical engineering. The two ended up falling in love and eventually got married in 1969. And about a year later, they had their son, Elon. Now, about a year after Elon was born, Rita's family was approved to be able to immigrate from the Soviet Union to Israel. So Rita's father had put in for a permit to be allowed to move his family from the Soviet Union to Israel. And this was about 15 years in the making, and it was finally being approved around the time that she had her son. But unfortunately, the Soviet did not allow Yakov to be a part of that move and the approved permit. So what they basically told Rita's family was that they could immigrate to Israel all they wanted, but they were not going to be taking a young, strong, capable, and very smart man being Yakov. They were not going to be allowed to take him out of the Soviet Union. He needed to be there to serve his country in any way that he could. So he he was forced to stay behind while the rest of the family immigrated to Israel. Now, this lit the activism fire for Rita. She ended up joining a human rights organization called the Soviet Jewry Movement, and it was an organization that really fought for human rights of Soviet Jews to be able to leave the Soviet as they saw fit to immigrate to other places. So she fought hard for her husband to have that right to be able to move with his family. Now, while she was fighting and being a part of this activist movement, she also was earning her graduate degree in chemistry at the very same time. She eventually moved to the US for a short time to continue her fight in human rights. She actually did an 18-day hunger strike in front of the UN to generate some buzz and some publicity and get the attention of those who needed to hear what she had to say. She also was able to meet with a number of leaders within the UN, including George H.W. Bush and some others at the time, to hear the voices of the Jews from the Soviet Union and the lack of human rights that they felt that they had in the country. And her hard work finally paid off, because on November 25th of 1971, the Soviet Union actually granted Yakov the ability to immigrate with his family to Israel. So the family met Yakov in Austria and they all moved together to Israel. But in 1977, the family decided that their permanent home was going to be New Jersey in the US. They built this beautiful hilltop dream home. At this point, Rita was an electrochemist and Yakov was a microbiologist who was doing research for cancer. And he was so good at his job that he actually developed a gold star methodology of researching cancer and searching for cures for cancer as well. So they were basically living what most immigrants see as the American dream, coming from such a horrible background, coming from parents who survived the Holocaust and having such a horrible childhood and being broken as a family for so many years, and they were still able to make the best out of it. They were still able to make it to the US and become millionaires and start their own businesses. Rita started the company ECI Technologies, which she ran as an electrochemist, and Yakov was doing his thing in microbiology and cancer research. It was the American dream. But everything was absolutely not as perfect as it seemed from the outside looking in. So Rita had a really bad luxury shopping habit, and it was to the point that she was spending, at the time, over $6,000 a month on herself and her dog. Now, this was back in 1977, so if we do some calculations on what that money would be in today's money, that was about $20,000 a month just on herself and the dog. So it was out of order. Now, she was also running her own company, ECI, into the ground. She was accumulating more debt before she could make the money to pay off that debt within the company. And Yakov was not happy about that because he was part owner of that company. It was their family business. Yakov was fed up. He wanted a divorce from Rita. He said in the divorce papers that outside of just her having a bad shopping habit, she was just impossible to satisfy. She called their beautiful hilltop home a shack. It was not good enough for her. No amount of money was ever good enough for her. No amount of shopping was ever good enough for her. She also had a horrible attitude, and he said that she was abusive to him as well. He wanted out of the relationship. Outside of just having a bad marriage between the two, Yakov had done a lot of traveling for work, and he met another microbiologist in Israel. Her name was Risa. They hit it off and eventually fell in love. So he really wanted out of his marriage. Now, unfortunately, and please don't ever do this, y'all, but Rita and Yakov decided that they were gonna stay married, painfully married, until Elon was old enough to move out on his own. Once he left the nest, they would divorce. However, in February of 1995, he did just that. Elon moved out, and so did Yakov. He got his own place in New York, and he was working on getting Risa to the US. They had tried to get a visa for her, but it had been denied, so they were trying to figure out other options to get here and get married. Now, Rita was not happy about any of this, to the point where she hired a private detective to follow Yakov around and get information on what he was doing and who he was with. So she wanted pictures of him being with Risa. What she found out was that he was actually taking money from their joint account, him and Rita, and was giving it to Risa instead. So kind of stashing or squirreling money away out of their joint account for once he's finalized in his divorce with Rita. She also found out that he and Risa were planning to get married once he was divorced. She was not having any of that. So she started trying to blackmail Yakov. She would send these photos to Yakov's father, trying to blackmail the family because, you know, it's a shame to be cheating while you're married, especially in a Jewish culture. And she was doing whatever she could to keep her cash cow. She was even secretly recording conversations within his apartment. So she was hearing everything, all his plans, whoever he was hanging out with, all his conversations, Rita had access to. But Yakov finally decided enough was enough. Along with filing the divorce, he's decided that, you know, I'm not gonna wait for Risa to get a visa to move to the US. I'm gonna move back to Israel and just be done with all of this. But eventually, they got on good terms during the divorce. Yakov had given Rita $90K to kind of tide her over until the divorce was final and whatever settlement shook out. At one point, she had asked to do something in his apartment and he had given her a spare key in this specific instance to get into his apartment while he was gone. That was a fatal mistake. And also that $90,000 that Yakov had given Rita to tide her over, she blew through it quick. Now, in March of 1996, Rita had gotten her cousin in on this plan, and the plan was to use the spare key that she had convinced Yakov to give to her and to sneak into his apartment, lie in wait for him, and attack him and kill him. Her cousin's name was Vlad, and he worked for her company at ECL. Now, he didn't speak very much English, so to have a job in such a company in the position that he had, he was extremely grateful and felt like he was indebted to her. You're never indebted enough to make poor decisions in life choices, but he felt like he was super indebted to his cousin for giving him this better life. So he went with her on this plan to hide and attack Yakov when he got home, but Yakov never showed up that night. So at some point they just got tired of waiting and they left. Now, a few weeks later in April, they tried this same plan again. They showed up with all types of weapons for this attack. They had 2 axes, they had a hammer, they had a hacksaw, a scalpel, a knife, and they also had a whole bag of cleaning supplies to make sure they cleaned up after they did what they came to do. So again, they got inside of Yakov's apartment, they hid, they had their weapons, and keep in mind that Rita armed herself with 2 axes. Now, when Yakov arrived at home, it was pitch black in there, it was dark, he works late, and he also worked late into the night. As soon as he got in, they jumped out and attacked him. The worst of the worst was Rita's portion of the attack. Again, with 2 axes, she attacked her husband. And he eventually died, and Vlad took Yakov's body into the bathroom, and it's very hard to say, but he dismembered him in the bathtub into 65 pieces. After that, they bagged everything up, they put Yakov in the trunk of his car, and they drove to the Passaic River, which was nearby ECL Technologies, which was Rita's business. Now, while they are at the river and they're getting ready to dispose of all of the evidence, the weapons, the body, everything, there is a police officer who is just driving by at night. He pulls up and sees 2 cars, one of them which eventually ends up being Yakov's car and the other being another car. But he sees a man, and this man is removing trash bags from out of the trunk of the car and throwing them into the Passaic River. So he watched for a little while and he felt like something's not right. This does not look good, and it doesn't look like it's just trash. So he ended up approaching the person. That person ended up being Vlad, and immediately he checks the bags. He sees weapons in one of the bags, and he opens another bag and sees, unfortunately, Yakov in another one of the bags, and at that point arrests Vlad on site, and Vlad just spills the tea. As soon as he gets to the station and they talk to him, he's ready to immediately spill the tea. He says, "This is what happened. It's Yakov Gluzman that you saw me throwing into the river, and this is everything that happened, and I helped my cousin Rita Gluzman, his wife, do this." The problem was police could never locate Rita herself. It took weeks for them to even get a lead on where Rita was. There was a cleaning lady that worked in the cottages that were actually owned by one of the companies that the Gluzmans work for, and they had been there before, and she was familiar with this cottage. So she broke into one of the small cottages, and a cleaning lady actually found her in the cottage hiding. When the cleaning lady found her, she ran, but she left things behind. This cleaning lady immediately notified the police. So when the police arrived, they find a lot of information, a treasure trove of information that Rita left behind. She left behind her own passport. She also had a whole bunch of international information for different airlines. She also had information on Switzerland itself. So it looked like she was planning to run away to Switzerland. And she also left behind stolen license plates. So she was planning on swapping it out and going on the run. Now, luckily, when Rita ran, she tried to kind of hide in the population in the area that the cottages were in, but unfortunately for her, her luxurious taste and her flamboyant taste ended up biting her in the butt, because what happened was the way she was dressed and all her accessories and, you know, all her glamorousness actually caused her to stand out. She wasn't able to blend in with the townspeople at the cafe having a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. She wasn't able to blend in. She stood out like a sore thumb. So police found her quick. And of course, when they found her, she denied everything. Now, Vlad had agreed to testify against his cousin in exchange for obviously a reduced sentence. But outside of Vlad's testimony, police had no other evidence linking Rita to what happened to her husband, Yakov. She had cleaned that house spotless, honey. They found no evidence, no blood, no fingerprints, fibers, nothing. The place was spotless when police went to investigate and take a look at his apartment. There was nothing there. They were heavily dependent on the testimony of her cousin Vlad. So police pull in the FBI to help. And what the police suggest is, okay, we can't necessarily get her on her being the person who came up as the mastermind of this murder. We can't charge her with murder. So there is kind of a loophole, which was the Violence Against Women Act. The Violence Against Women Act actually covers both men, women. It's gender neutral, but it's a law that protects another party against domestic violence happening across state lines. So basically, if a spouse travels across state lines to attack their spouse in any way, enact domestic violence on their spouse in any way, that is what that act is there to protect. And technically, she did cross from New Jersey to New York to attack her husband. So that is what she was tried for in court. She went to trial, and on April 30th of 1997, she was found guilty and she was sentenced to life in prison. She did try to appeal, but all of those appeals were denied. Now, unfortunately, on July 29th of 2020, Rita was granted a compassionate release, or a release of compassion, because she had declining health. She had a number of health issues, so they felt like she's not gonna live a valuable life outside of prison anyway, so let's give her a compassionate release. Now, there were a number of stipulations and things that she had to follow. She had to wear a GPS monitor. She was not allowed to contact any of her family, including her son, who hated her at this point for taking her father away and doing what she did. But there was a ton of stipulations that she had to abide by. So as of now, she is out on parole. I have not heard anything about her passing away or any updates on her since 2020. Now, her cousin Vlad got 22.5 years in prison for his part in this crime. He got a lighter sentence in exchange for his testimony against his cousin, and he was eventually released in 2015. Now, Rita's sister and Rita's son eventually took over ECI Technologies, the company that Rita had once run into the ground, but they brought it back to life. It's been profitable. It's making millions of dollars at this point. And fortunately, even after her son having gone through that, he's doing really well. He has his own family. He's doing great. So again, I'm hoping that he got the care, the therapy, all of that he needed to recover from such a tragic, tragic situation. Losing your father at the hands of your mother for nothing more than greed. But that is the story of Rita Gluzman, the woman who basically took fighting for her marriage to a whole nother level, and it went way left. Again, I keep saying this, divorce is always an option. You don't lose what you think you lose by having a divorce. There are things that you gain, which is, you know, your freedom, not having to deal with that other person if you're not happy with your situation. You also don't lose your family. You don't lose your children, your son that never wants to speak to you again at this point because of what you did to his father. It's just crazy how these people just feel like it's just not enough. It's never enough, but some people will never have enough to satisfy them. And this was one of those cases. But let me know what you guys think about this story. I want to hear it in those comments down below. Have you heard of this story before? I was just taken aback with her arming herself with 2 axes and going after her husband. That is just a whole nother level of anger. I just can't even imagine. You know, I can't do a video without wrapping up the skincare routine with my daily fragrance. And this week's fragrance is my Kilian Princess fragrance. I absolutely love this fragrance. I get so many compliments on this fragrance. It's such a beautiful fragrance. It just makes you feel pretty, if that makes sense. It's not too forward. It's not too overpowering. It lingers. It has great longevity, good sillage, but not so strong that it's over projecting. It's just a pretty fragrance, and I absolutely love it. Let me know if you guys have tried this fragrance before and what you think of it. It's one of my favorites from Kilian, but I want to hear what you think of this fragrance as well. That's it, y'all. I really hope you enjoyed this week's installment of Snapped in Skincare, also known as Clean Skin Dirty Deeds. But it's been fun, it's been real, and until next time, love you guys. Bye.